So guys, the United States just can't stop placing sanctions on Chinese companies. So what have these companies done? They have found a way around it. And of course, that's where Mexico comes in. It's a very complicated situation, and I'll tell you why in this video. Now, it has become very clear that no matter what China does, it will still get sanctioned by the USA. No matter what many companies from China trying to establish a foothold in the USA, they will still seem to get blocked by many tariffs, many sanctions, and of course bans. Now here's the backstory. According to the US commerce statistics, Mexico overtook China as the biggest exporter of goods to the USA last year, and there have been more truck shipments across the border into the USA in recent years from Mexico. But then guys, it might shock you to know that despite all of this, China is still the winner in imports to the USA. Now let me explain. Many have said Mexico will be the next China. That's what so many people said. Not just Mexico, some said Vietnam, some said India. And again, many people said companies are moving away from China to Mexico, and they said Mexico's production has increased while China's production has reduced drastically. Well, to an extent, I can say that's true. But guess what, guys? What they are not telling you is this. Mexico is just a proxy for China to get into the USA. First, we need to understand that the US has placed uncountable number of trade tariffs on Chinese goods, from agricultural products to tech products and even machinery. Recently, US imports from Mexico rose to nearly 5%, while Chinese imports to the USA dropped by about 20%. Normally, when we look at the news from the surface, it clearly shows that the US is winning, and of course, by buying from Mexico, which is much closer to the USA as compared to China, and of course, benefiting from more trade with their next door neighbor, Mexico, and of course, less with China, which is what the US has always wanted. But then, here's the bigger picture, guys. The change in trade volume doesn't in any way mean that the USA no longer depends on imports from China, but we need to understand that Mexico mostly ships products like vehicles, agricultural products, and a few other consumable products to the USA. Meanwhile, China, on the other hand, still has the authority in quantity over some specific goods that can only be obtained from China, like solar cells, tech products, and rare earth minerals. Now, here's where the whole situation gets serious and, of course, gives China the upper hand. With the free trade agreements between the USA, Mexico, and Canada, that's the USMCA, tariffs on most goods manufactured in Mexico are completely free of tax. Reason why more and more Chinese products are being shipped into Mexico to be finalized and exported to the USA. And of course, you guessed it, this helps to reduce duties and trade tariffs on the goods produced in Mexico. So we can clearly realize that the data which I mentioned earlier can only be accurate if and when we include the fact that most of the finalized goods from Mexico into the USA use raw materials and products from China for assembly. We need to understand that despite the multiple tariffs and trade restrictions on China by the USA, all of these restrictions are non-existent in the case of goods made in Mexico, as there are trade deals between Mexico, the US, and Canada. Reason why many industries in the US, especially automakers, rely heavily on Mexican plants to be able to curb cost and spread production, and of course increase their profit. We can clearly see that China is definitely making good use of these trade deals, because we need to understand that all the trade sanctions by the USA on China isn't only affecting the Chinese businesses, but it is also affecting the US businesses that always want to find a way around it, because at the end of the day, every business simply aims to maximize their profit. Now, the final nail on the head is that recently, Chinese investments flooding into Mexico only represents a rerouting of trade from China through Mexico and of course into the USA, and Chinese products from China are being shipped into Mexico to be finalized and exported to the United States, which then has zero duty and tariffs like goods imported directly from China. Now, figures from container trade statistics shows that the number of 20-feet containers shipped from China to Mexico hits 881,000 in the first 3 quarters of 2023. And you'll understand more reasons for this in a little while. Now, when we analyze correctly, we realize that Chinese investments in Mexico is mainly geared towards manufacturing facilities which are then shipped into the USA. Reason why most auto parts made by Chinese factories in Mexico and exported to the USA increased by 15% around 2022, and of course it's been increasing even more since then. Now, recently I told you guys in one of my previous videos that BYD was planning on building a mega EV factory in Mexico for the assembly of BYD vehicles, mainly for exports to the US market. And it's because of this reason that BYD is currently planning to build a huge mega factory. Because like I said, every company only aims to maximize profit. So this definitely helps BYD. And of course, it's not just BYD alone. Now, China-based battery maker Amperex Technology is already planning to open a facility in Mexico, just like BYD has done already, alongside other China lithium mining companies willing to open in Mexico. And with all of this happening, the US definitely had to react. Reason why the US is recently considering an increase in tariffs on all Chinese EVs, no matter where they are finally assembled, in order to control the export of Chinese EVs and of course productions through Mexico. But here's where the problem lies, Willenials. With this strategy, many laws will need to be changed, which might also affect US automakers that have plants and factories in Mexico. So it definitely means that if the USA pushes through with this law, it will definitely affect American businesses that are found in Mexico. Now, on the flip side, Mexico is definitely the huge winner in this general war. And I believe if Mexico uses this opportunity properly, they can definitely find themselves the winner on both sides, because getting from China and of course sending to the US gives Mexico lots of jobs and more advantage for their economy. Now, the former chief economist at the Institute of International Finance, Robin Brooks, even said the US is the world's biggest consumer of stuff. China is the world's biggest producer of goods. One way or another, these two forces have to meet. At the end of the day, guys, let's ask ourselves this question. Who is suffering more? Is it the Chinese businesses or the businesses in the US and the consumers in the United States? At the end of the day, we should understand that there are more than 7 billion people in the world, and in the US there's just over 300 million people. And yes, of course, the USA definitely has a huge buying potential with many consumers of goods from all around the world. But the world is also large, and most of the world recently is a huge market for Chinese products. What we just keep looking forward to right now is to see how Chinese EVs will get into the US market. When it gets into the US market, I'm guessing the prices of EVs in the US market will definitely drop drastically, just as seen across Europe. Reason why I believe the US government is trying to maintain these sanctions in order to help save their own local businesses. By the way, I'll keep you guys posted on all the details on this topic as it proceeds. We just hope that all these trade tariffs can be limited and there can be more free trade, because with so many sanctions by the USA on China, it's really sad. And that of course affects the consumers and businessmen in China and of course in the United States, which is definitely bad for business. Well, if you want to see the video I made on BYD expanding globally, feel free to watch the video right here. By the way, guys, if you want to see more amazing videos on this channel weekly, feel free to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, this is Willene. See you next time.